Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Today is Friday, January 27th. In the last stream, my computer just randomly reboot. I'm hoping that was nothing. It does seem like you can't be guaranteed no random reboots ever on Windows or PCs ever, unfortunately. Um, But also, I have to wonder if there's literally just an intentional bug when you're sitting on a Windows update to reboot. Let's see. We have updated the rewards for the Duel Pass. Does that really change anything? I don't know. But yeah, my computer rebooted, which caused the entirety of the stream to just end. So there's kind of lost footage there. Maybe in a couple of years, the pre-recorded video will come out and you can see it. It didn't really matter. I'm still in this weird situation where, for this stream and Monday and possibly even more, I'm just at any point going to end my recording anyway. So just assume, might as well just assume that's what happened. So yeah, apologies for that. I am in this weird situation certainly where I'm in the middle of having the most amount of success ever, or at least in a very long time. Let's just go and buy the Duel Pass on my channel through the YouTube Shorts, and pre-recorded footage is in a bad space because I'm really only releasing one pre-recorded series at a time, which I do think I might just like work backwards with some kids content, and like when I make 30 days worth of kids content or so, I will put it like December of next year, or January, or even February of next year, and then work backwards from there. So if I started, say, in February, whatever 12 months would be from the point I finished recording that series, I would go back, if I felt confident, to record another kids series for another month, go back another month, and another month, until I just crash into a series that literally I would have too many episodes for now. That would mean making the kid series more independent of each other and not really a narrative thread, which is fine because I pretty much should do that and was doing that anyways. So, yep. So yeah, that's definitely a thought. We might be getting some more variety or just more rewards in general from this month's gold pass. That being said, I'm not 100% sure that I don't already own the Karibo. I would have thought that they would have already released that as something, but I guess not. They're holding back. I did play a little bit of this. I am definitely not making a lot of progress on this though. It's not been super successful. And yeah, I've just been very busy with other things. I did manage to get some videos scheduled, and I'm doing an accountability section when I really shouldn't. I guess what I want to do is probably just do the accountability section, but try and keep it extremely brief. I've had a nightmare time with the Tuya smart bulbs that I was trying to set up. They were working for a couple of days, and then all of a sudden there's just a lot of losing connection, at least in a small temporary for a minute or two. So it was just not working. I've set up a new system. I'm hoping the new system works instead of having a timer set for the, like 12 bulbs to turn off when they no longer see that the main light switch bulbs are on. I've set up a timer on an outlet that I had extra, and I would just never use that timer. So I'm using a timer on a different product to be a centralized timer for all the bulbs, and then I'm just having it run the signal to turn off the bulbs when that timer is lower. I'm also feeling like the Tuya system itself is just kind of poorly programmed and doesn't respond very well. So I had to put a pretty long buffer of, I would say it's probably close to 8 minutes of time has to go off before the timer can go can reach that point in which it would turn off the lights. If I try to bring it down too much, I could try and tweak it, but honestly, I just want it to work, and I want it to be consistent to work. I would at this time definitely name and shame. I think the name of the bulbs are Day Better, and I would say probably don't buy those. I would also say, even though it will be incredibly expensive, there's definitely an argument in experimenting with Zigbee instead of Wi-Fi bulbs and just having a single Zigbee bridge on top, which would add even more cost, because I think there is just a faster reaction time and a more custom thought process around Zigbee as far as you hit a switch and the lights could turn on faster versus going through the Wi-Fi, going through the internet. Like, notably, I really haven't had problems with the first set of bulbs I had that weren't available, and I definitely would pick that brand, and that is the problem with it. And it's just too many bulbs to, like, return them all. Like, that is definitely on the table, but I got like 12 of them, so if I have to run around and replace 12 bulbs, that would be annoying. Plus, that then just gets back to the same issue. So I'm hoping I can just get it to work and work good enough to leave it as it is and call it a finished project for a while. Because it definitely was a nightmare yesterday of just like the bulbs not getting a signal, some flipping off and then having timers to flip back on, so they're just flickering every couple of minutes. They're, well, not flickering, but flipping off and on, and that's unacceptable. And then I did also play a little bit of Dicey Dungeon, so I'll mention that. Dicey Dungeon, I have potentially 6 hours plus still of gameplay to do with Dicey Dungeon, and it is just way too much. Like, way too much time and commitment. Guess just end the turn there. This isn't an actual article from GameDeveloper.com as much as it is just well, it is an article, but it's an developer insight is what they describe it as, instead of being news. But it is interesting, certainly, as far as showing off the artwork of Prince of Persia games and its many different releases and the development process. I can't help but say I'm sad that we can't do any of these like Persian art styles or parts of our art, even if it was never accurate, never like an accurate description of how people dressed or looked, particularly white-skinned people. But yeah, in particular, what was Persia is now a Muslim country, I'm pretty sure, and so you definitely wouldn't have a Scheherazade type character here with any skin showing, and you definitely wouldn't have like white actors pretending to be Persian with crazy mustaches. But there is something to be said that it is acceptable, at least in my opinion, to have fictional histories, but that is inherently what they would call racist caricatures too, and there's an argument certainly on both sides that a lack of actual knowledge in the minds of creators and story writers, and the just straight up lying that happened amongst British explorers who just made up stories and things they saw. Is definitely a lack of care to actually understand. Yeah. Again, I'm not really getting anywhere, but I also don't really feel a desire to go back and try and play any of the loner decks. I would prefer to just possibly win with this deck. Prince of Persia itself as a game runs into that problem in that that's why they made Assassin's Creed instead, is to in part get away from the small growing number of complaints around Prince of Persia games with the Sands of Time and stuff like that, and just get away from the overly successful Sands of Time series. Let's see. Guess we'll do a field spell. And then I guess we'll activate this. And then I guess we'll special summon this, which the queen character is 100 less than the Oblivion character. And then I guess we just attack here. We don't have anything else we can do. Here you can see Prince of Persia's changed appearance with a lot of different arts. When you scroll down here, you see this is probably one of its earliest releases. And It's kind of a perfect example of how box art was nowhere close to what the actual game looked like. But then you also run into the revelation here. This is basically the guy who programmed it, and these are all the photos, the high contrast photos that he scanned in or used to animate each action. And I believe it was his brother that was doing all of the actions, and his brother was kind of a athletic type person. And here you can see the technology would have been working on to make the game. Yeah. So Jordan Mechner went on to be somewhat famous as one of those first generation game developers, and kind of came back when they did make a remake of Katakana, I think is the name of it, which may actually have predated Prince of Persia, or may have had no connection to Prince of Persia. Like, you do have this weirdness certainly around. Man, why am I only getting? I'm just losing like non-stop, even when it looks like I should be winning. Am I getting distracted and surrendering? Very possibly. I may just not be moving fast enough. It would be incredibly difficult to bring back Prince of Persia, the first Prince of Persia games. Like, they just would not work as a game these days. If anything, you would automate the whole thing, and it would potentially be an infinite runner or something, or a gacha game or mobile game. But the actual platforming aspects, as they're first established and laid out in an early platformer like Prince of Persia, is just not enough for a full game by modern standards. Also, of course, you'd want the Sands of Time type 3D running and wall running and swinging and fighting stuff, and once you start to throw in all of that, you're really not talking about the first Prince of Persia game at all. I also should have mentioned that I changed my layout. The text scroll at the top is now bigger. The look at the gameplay screen in the top right is in line with that size. Inherently, this is to try and have a one-to-one pixel copy of what is being captured, instead of stretching out the actual web page to fit. Now, I don't think I did this quite perfectly, because if I can find a link on this page somewhere, what I was doing was cutting off the bottom so that you wouldn't get the URL pop up in the lower left, and I didn't account for that. So more tweaking is necessary to cut off the last few pixels. And I was working somewhat to try and capture the cursor while doing the sensor blur, and it should have worked, but it didn't. So I don't know what's really going on there. There is an avenue, though, that might happen where I have a different way in which I could add a cursor. Effectively, there's a plugin that would allow for you to create a fake cursor and put a custom image as the cursor there. And I might go with that. It's not particularly the biggest of deals. Seems like every time I try to activate a card, they're screwing me over here. See what this does. Equip. Oh, I have no idea what to equip. This is, at least when I'm playing the Oblivion deck, I know what I'm doing. Here it's just randomly activating cards in the hope that it would possibly do something. Yeah, it definitely seems like the strategy here is to try and have these boats. Yeah, and see, even at that though, you still just like have no options. It's like attack this. And then you have a 3,000 that he'll just defeat you with, so that's not that helpful. Alright, let's go through VGC, Video Games Chronicle. It did occur to me, by the way, that I should probably make a short video just explaining the origins of the YouTube Shorts. That way I can just link to that video to explain the origins. That way, if somebody says why or did you make this game, something like that, then I have a real response to just say check out this video without having to type out some kind of canned response, which I don't know if people would respond to that any better than anything else, but whatever. Also, I had so many YouTube Shorts, and since I was scheduling things, I opted to go for a 4th time slot early in the morning at like 4 a.m. Central Time in the United States. So I am just pushing it earlier with the YouTube Shorts to see if that matters too much. Like, generally I'm not getting notifications from these YouTube Shorts anymore, but who knows how that really is supposed to be working as far as YouTube and their algorithms. And like, technically I'm subscribed and have clicked the bell, but at some point I think there will be a subscribe button for shorts and a subscribe button for live streams and a subscribe button for pre-recorded footage that YouTube rolls out. And inherently there will be people that will just want to watch the shorts on my channel and nothing else. And arguably I should probably, at some point, if I get successful enough, pull some kind of bait and switch and move the shorts to its own channel. That's something you almost have to do on YouTube eventually, is just say, I'm moving this content that some people like to its own channel, and everybody needs to go and subscribe to this other channel. So then I get twice as many subscribers that are overlapping, and I look like I have twice as many subscribers or viewers than I do. You still have to get like 10 million views on shorts in the last, I think, 128 days, 190 days. Like, it's not even in the last, it's not even on the same scale as the other requirements as far as just watch hours on YouTube to be monetized. So inherently, nobody is getting any money from the YouTube Shorts funds unless you are getting at least 10 million views and are straight up just a famous TikToker or a very successful TikToker who's moved over to YouTube. And I don't know why anybody would really be surprised by that. I think Google begrudgingly and YouTube begrudgingly pays anybody for any content, and they really only want to pay the biggest and the best, most successful people and profit off the smallest thing. It is definitely pyramid scheme like the way YouTube is run. And I guess of all those Google layoffs, I don't think too many of them actually ended up affecting YouTube. Alright, let's do this and this. I wish when you were summoning this and it gave you these yellow things, you would have arrows that would point in the direction that it would point. Let's now summon this. Then we also need to focus on the news. Jump from that to that. Do I have any banished cards? Yes, I do. So now he has 2 material. Not sure what the material does, though. Alright, Video Games Chronicles articles. The delayed PlayStation 5 version of Football Manager has received a new release date. That release date is February 1st. So, okay, take that information. Disney Dreamlight Valley's early 2023 content roadmap has been revealed. The game's next major update will add Encanto's Mirabel and Frozen's Olaf. I feel like this is a game in particular that is just going to be settling into the path that it wanted to set and settling into the fandom that it already has. Like, if the general idea of a Disney game does not appeal, adding one more Disney character is not likely to really appeal. The biggest thing I think they could do is just add kid body sizes, so you could play as a kid instead of playing as a Disney adult, and I just don't think they're going to do that. So yeah, Disney will eventually run out of characters they can add, or run out of content they can add. It doesn't feel like they really have added too much. Now, at a certain level, also, I'd say Animal Crossing has the exact same problem, is that either you like the gameplay mechanics in Animal Crossing or you don't. And any post-release content update that Nintendo has put out for Animal Crossing is not likely to be good enough or big enough to bring in a new audience. I wouldn't be surprised if Dreamlight Valley just stays around for a decent amount of time just because it's profitable and successful enough. I also wouldn't be surprised if it fairly dries up and gets abandoned fairly quickly, too. Some Walmart and GameStop stores were reportedly selling Dead Space early. Dead Space is now out now. So this is kind of an old article from Video Games Chronicles at this point. Video Games Chronicle. I'm never going to get that right. The bigger story certainly is there is new content in Dead Space. It isn't just a remaster. I think it was J-Man Lives that I watched his review of it, which he's a YouTuber that pretty much exclusively focuses on shooter games, first-person, third-person shooters. So he's kind of more of an expert critic for that focus. And he just says he loved the remake. It's almost a perfect game. It launches with New Game Plus instead of Callisto Protocol being delayed around the New Game Plus. There is... He generally said the reason why the girlfriend... He assumes the reason why the girlfriend looks now like a 40-year-old woman instead of a closer to 20 or 30-year-old woman is because he's assuming that they changed the face to look like the voice actress, or the way the voice actress looks now. I don't know if they've changed the voice actress as far as the girlfriend. Probably. Isaac now talks in cutscenes and isn't just this silent protagonist throughout the old game, which that was a gimmick that really didn't need to be played in the first game. There's some slight changes in characterizations as far as why people do certain things. So the story isn't 100% the same, but mostly it does seem like the whole game is going to feel very much like the original Dead Space. They've gotten rid of a lot of loading screen type stuff. It's just unnecessary in modern times. It's maybe a rare situation as far as the Dead Space remake, in that they may have started as just planning to make a remaster of Dead Space, and it may have just gone so well that they were able to somehow get the funding from the publisher to add new content and really change things up. Because I definitely could have seen this game, the Dead Space remake, being sold more as a Dead Space remaster with bonus new content, which is probably the better way to think of it, honestly, as a remaster with bonus new content. I think you're still going to have 85% of the content is the same, or it's going to at least feel extremely similar. And it definitely feels like it's still playing towards the idea of connecting to Dead Space 2 and Dead Space 3 as they are. And perhaps in this experiment of making a remaster with some slightly changed content or bonus content, they've set themselves up well enough through this success in which they could make a Dead Space 2 remaster, which is 85% the same and just a few things tweaked and changed. And then they could make a Dead Space 3, which maybe they need to change about 50% of everything in Dead Space 3. But if they could gain sales and momentum, they could get to that point of changing Dead Space 3. They definitely have set themselves up to have a chance of doing that, at least. Of course, EA hasn't mentioned anything like that, and EA would have to be doing something very different. The game is still on the Frostbite engine, according to J-Man's Lives, so it's not like they jumped it over to Unreal Engine. I think it was on Frostbite engine originally too, so yeah, I assume what they've done here is just updated it to a much newer version of the Frostbite engine. But it's nice to hear that people seem to be liking it. Because it could have just been a mediocre remake. Too expensive, not really doing anything different. I haven't heard about any bugs, so it gets over the bugs that were in the current version of the game where you have to turn off frame sync. Otherwise, you'll not be able to walk through a door at the very beginning of the game. So, yeah. And I don't think they have. I haven't seen any news that they've taken off like the original version of Dead Space either. So seems like you could still buy that too. So they're not taking away anything. So nice release. It's a shame Callisto Protocol wasn't something more, though, because we still are in this weird situation where nobody is really promising any new Dead Space-like content. Not between the original creators making Callisto Protocol and the EA people making the Dead Space remake. It would be highly unlikely that we would get a Callisto Protocol 2 at this point. I assume that there probably is some other monster game out there that's a third person or first person shooter, but I don't know exactly what that would be. Like you could go with like something like Dying Light maybe, but you're not going to have the elements of cutting off the limbs if it's not a Dead Space game, or it's unlikely you'll have something like that. That's yet another concept that people could have stolen and copied, and people just didn't just steal and copy enough of that. Yeah, let's just stick with what we've got. So, yeah. And I imagine Silent Hill won't be a game where you have just infinite bullets, where you have that action shooter experience. Some of the Borderlands games would be kind of like it, but not really, because then you're not getting into the horror aspect. And maybe that's the problem, is that unless Alone in the Dark comes out and somehow is somewhat similar, I think we're really getting teased here as far as if you're looking for a sci-fi horror action game. I don't think that there's anything else I can think of that'll be coming out in the next couple years. So I guess it's just savor the Dead Space remake now and hope that EA announces a Dead Space 2 remake or a new game. Like, it would be nice, frankly, if they announced a new game too and just went in that direction. You can of course always play the Resident Evil games, and I guess that's where Resident Evil Village or Resident Evil 7 sold particularly well, and that probably convinced EA to make the Dead Space remake in the first place. And you don't quite get that sci-fi space aspect in Resident Evil, but you get everything else. Microsoft had that developer direct event. I did watch it. It didn't pay a lot of attention to it, and it really wasn't worth my time to watch. Like most of these events, they announced a few things, like Mojang revealed Minecraft Legends, April release date, and shows off player versus player. Minecraft Legends really is just Fortnite with Minecraft characters, and just, I don't know if there's anything else to really even say there. It is just Fortnite with Minecraft characters. It's kind of a sad example of Microsoft definitely pushing for, I think it's probably too late to activate this, but let's do it anyways. I think it is just a sad example of Mojang being forced to try and make more and more money from Minecraft, which, yeah, at a certain level, I wouldn't be surprised if Microsoft really kind of got screwed in that deal. They didn't do their due diligence or research or think things through when I can't even remember the guy who made Minecraft, what his name was. Yeah, he wanted to disappear from the limelight, and he did it so well I can't even remember his hacker gamer tag name. Notch was his name. Yeah, when Notch basically just got tired of all the publicity and said I'd be willing to sell Minecraft, and then Microsoft swooped in and bought it, I don't think they thought it through, and they paid him, I'm sure, a pretty penny, and now they've probably not gotten as much profit from it as they would like, considering Notch would have sold Minecraft at the height of its success, in which basically everybody had already bought an account or gotten a copy of the game, and so there was a saturation there. It wasn't like they would then be able to sell it all over again, and they've tried so many different ways to sell Minecraft all over again by pushing the non-Java edition and instead pushing a marketplace to sell capes and costumes and maps, and trying to have microtransactions in a kids game. Plus they've made a couple of Minecraft side games that haven't been super successful. The Telltale Minecraft game, I think, was pretty alright by going completely away from really playing like Minecraft, whereas this Minecraft Legends is still going to play a lot like Minecraft, so it probably won't work that well. Now, inherently, you might have some success with Minecraft Legends in the fact that if this gets on Apple iOS Store as a Fortnite replacement, well, then you've got some potential audience there that would have been Fortnite fans before but can't play Fortnite on their Apple products. That being said, it's actually not being released for cell phones, which is almost certainly a mistake. Another thing that they shadow dropped is what they're saying, but honestly, I feel like what happened here is this game leaked when they really hadn't planned on it leaking, and so they just opted to release it early. They probably were going to release it maybe in a couple of weeks otherwise, and then they're just releasing it early, at least on Xbox Game Pass was easy enough. This is from Tango Gameworks, this Hi-Fi Rush. So it's a very different game from the Evil Within 1 and the Evil Within 2. And it is definitely more of a music-based rhythm game. They've got a lot of licensed music. I'm seeing a lot of people loving it, though. And I think probably there is some desperation in that as to why people are loving it, in that there just hasn't been a massive amount of releases this year so far, which is, it's always dry in January. So yeah, there's probably a little desperation as to why people are liking it, but I could also see people just liking it because it's good. I'm not particularly interested. Sorry, I'm pouring water from one cup into another cup that had ice in it, which I guess is the right way to do that, because if you did it the other way, you would splash the ice cubes into the water. This is probably very good for Tango Gameworks to just get away from the Evil Within and do something completely different. They don't need to be, frankly, burdened with the attempt or to try to sell the idea that they are actually the creators or the people behind the Resident Evil series, because frankly it just didn't work. Evil Within 1 was alright, but then the guy who was connected to Resident Evil didn't even really work that much, it feels like, on the Evil Within 2, and even in that, the Evil Within 2 was trying to move away from really being a horror game as much as being a horror survival game with a lot of crates that you had to find around the game. I'd be much happier. I'm always happy to see companies just do what they want to do, particularly if it's going to be something a little bit different and wild and out there. And this definitely feels very Japanese, as it were. Here you have a electric cat with a Japanese symbol. You've got a guy with a robot arm and looking kind of cool. So yeah. Here's some deluxe edition stuff. You take on these different bosses, each boss fight being kind of music based too, rhythm based. Just like every action in the game is based on the music, is what I heard from it. Again, I didn't pay too much attention to it. And I would say personally, even though I see a lot of other people hyped about this, it didn't catch my attention that much. Like, they might as well have shadow released it or released it just early, because at the core of it, had they tried to do a trailer to get me interested in it, they probably would have failed anyways. And a new property that definitely feels like it's a smaller experimental property probably is better to just save on the advertisement. Of course, this might set a bad precedent in which Microsoft just starts being very cheap about their advertisements and just like not putting out commercials, which, when is the last time Microsoft has put out a commercial on TV, or you've seen an ad anywhere for a Microsoft product? It's probably been a while. It might go back to like Christmas of the previous year, not even like 2021. I don't watch a lot of TV though, so I'm probably missing it. Anyways. But yeah. Also, during this presentation, they came out and said they were going to do a separate presentation around the Starlink Bethesda game. So they didn't say anything about that at all. And it was kind of interesting that the Developer Direct video that they linked to was linked to like Bethesda's YouTube channel instead of Microsoft or Xbox's YouTube channel. The video seemed to be on Xbox's channel, but it's a little weird. It would be very crazy if ZeniMax somehow convinced Microsoft to change its name to Bethesda, or ZeniMax or something like that. Although, you know, Microsoft did buy all these names. It wouldn't be crazy to take a name like Bethesda if it has more positive association to it, and use that name for their entire division. Instead of it being the Xbox division, it becomes the Bethesda division. And then the Xboxes could change their name from being Xboxes to being some other property. But I don't think that would work. They have already kind of dropped the Microsoft branding, though. It's like nobody calls it the Microsoft Xbox One. And they've put a lot of time into the branding already, so it would be a big pivot. And I'm sure Tango Gameworks and Double Fine wouldn't be super happy if all of a sudden they're being associated with Bethesda games when they really aren't doing anything with Bethesda. Moving on, Forza Motorsport new deep dive promises the most technically advanced racing game ever. Redfall's release date and special edition and pre-order bonuses were announced. I definitely tuned out as soon as they started talking about Redfall. It's coming out May 2nd. Like, I'm willing to believe Redfall might actually be a decent game, but I am just tired of hearing about it at this point. Xbox confirms it will return to LA with a summer showcase this year. The first physical E3 event in 4 years is set to take place in June. It definitely feels like what they may still be doing here is just pretending like they plan on doing something for E3. There is a chance that this really would happen this year because they have different organizers running E3 at this point. Microsoft is part of the ESA or the ESRB, so they are running E3 themselves. Microsoft has there's a lot of reason to still have a major presence there, or at least some prestige around having a major presence there. So, yeah. Until they announce a complete, like, irrelevancy or ending of E3, I think Microsoft will commit to it to a certain level. And I don't personally feel like it would be particularly different from a direct video in one way or the other. But I'm sure there's some people that do feel like it is a little bit different. Having people on the stage and having it look like an awards show does have a slightly different feel than a direct, which is just a combination of different people's edited videos. But it's not a big enough difference. If you look at this picture is incredibly old, because you have Call of Duty Black Ops here and Lego DC Supervillains. Those are pretty old games. New Xbox Game Pass titles for the console, PC, and cloud have been announced. Let's see if they have a full list. GoldenEye 007, which Game Pass date is January 31st. You'd think that would be a big deal. Donut County Taco no Tetsujin, Telling Lies, and Worms WMD are all leaving on January 31st. Ages of Empire and several other games are added on the 31st. And then several more games are being added on February 7th here. So, yep, they are definitely hyping up this. And then apparently Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscribers can currently claim 3-month trials of Apple TV Plus and Apple Music, which is somewhat of an odd bedfellows that you would have Microsoft and Apple working together. But it is also probably an admission that Microsoft has no success or no interest in Apple TV or Apple Music competitors. So, yeah. The problem with each of these, like, combined prices is that they tend to still be way too expensive. Let's see. The FTC sued Microsoft to stop the EU accepting a settlement over Activision's deal, it's claimed. The U.S. regulator recently filed a lawsuit in a bid to block Microsoft's acquisition of Activision. I don't see how the FTC suing in United States court process would in any way stop the European Union from accepting a settlement, but who knows? Maybe it's just that would influence their decision. They filed the complaint quicker than expected because it wanted to preempt its European counterparts who were preparing to negotiate a potential compromise with Microsoft. So preempting them or just acting before them is not actively trying to influence them in any way. But there is a appearance there. Like, it would be very weird if there was some kind of international law that would say the FTC suing would somehow affect the European Union and basically strip the sovereignty and the right to rule themselves as far as the European Union goes, which on a separate level, the European Union being a union of individual countries that have already stripped their own sovereignty to become part of the European Union. Um, but yeah, it really is more just about appearance, it seems, than anything they could really do. There is a lot of danger, certainly, between international laws and treaties and that are negotiated outside of the people's will in the United States or the people's will in any country, um, in the sense that I think the President of the United States has a pretty wide amount of freedom to negotiate any treaty whatsoever and can negotiate things like copyright laws in the form of a treaty to enforce something that would not pass through Congress and the Senate and the House of Representatives, which that is Congress, is the combination of Senate and House of Representatives. And inherently, because the president is potentially making a treaty or some international law he's agreeing to, there's less accountability there. You can't. I don't know if you could really recall a senator or a state representative, anyways, but you definitely can't easily recall a president. So, yeah. Arguably, there should be more limitations there. That is definitely a thing that was around, like the SOPA push, and even now they're still trying to push something. They're not calling it SOPA anymore because that was unpopular and it got pushback, but there definitely is still an effort to have something like SOPA happen to incredibly increase the copyright laws to benefit large companies, international companies, influence copyrights in other countries that would have never been approved by the Copyright Office in the United States. But yeah. And I'm sure there's plenty of other laws that are also kind of a nightmare. We really aren't getting a lot of these while we're trying to do this theme battle, so because I'm just not winning. At a certain level, it might be better just to try and play, but I'm obviously going to fail to get anywhere further as far as platinum and ranked. And then this theme ends in just a couple of days. So, best case scenario, we get this, which I really don't even care about. Ideally, I want to get up to this point to get the gems. And then I kind of don't care about the legacy packs, but it would be nice if we got some. But I really need to start winning, and I just don't have time to play anymore. So, we'll leave it at that. A PlayStation Plus Classic game has had trophy support patched in months after being added. Super Stardust Portable shows that classics without trophies could still get them, which I guess is somewhat interesting. Of course, retro achievements have existed for older ROMs of games for people running emulators like RetroArch. And they're expanding more on that to add trophy or achievement type things to games that in no way would have been built for that. But this is slightly different in that this is actually the official game developer, publisher, adding in achievements for games that aren't really that retro. PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, PlayStation Portable games, and PS3 games. which those are previous generation achievements. What didn't happen at the Microsoft presentation wasn't any teaser announcement of any new hardware, which it would have been interesting if they had announced something new there, but I'm not surprised they didn't. Warzone 2 Season 2 is set to introduce big changes to loot, armor, and loadouts, according to Video Games Chronicle. Check out that article if you're interested, since I'm not. EA confirms Dead Space has a secret ending and a new game plus. The remake will be released on Friday. It's already out. At least reviews are already out. To get the alternate ending, they already have a guide. Which, okay. Kenny Omega and Raul Kali will appear in Like a Dragon Ishin, which I assume those are both wrestlers. Kenny Omega sounds familiar. Raul Kali, somewhat familiar. I wouldn't have assumed that either one of these were actually the people that going by that name, though, because yeah, they're not big names. Seems like they might be in little trading cards, trooper cards. Nope. Actually, Raul Kali is not a wrestler. He was in the movie Midnight Mass, or the TV series, Netflix series Midnight Mass, which that was definitely a long series. Too long probably for its own good. The DualSense Edge has a smaller battery than the standard DualSense, a teardown reveals. Notably also, the batteries are not replaceable in the PlayStation controllers. I don't think they are. Which, yeah, PlayStation controllers, I think for a fairly long time, have not had replaceable batteries. Even if you were going to go with just a battery pack in plastic, being able to remove it and replace it should be kind of required. Like legally, any kid's toy needs a screw to lock the batteries into the case. It needs to be something where you can't just slide open a piece of plastic and get to the batteries. In the United States, that was a law that was added at some point. Maybe it's not even really a law, but it's pretty much standard now. But they really should go the other way and say all devices with battery have to have a removable battery, and I can't see too many things getting exemptions. Medical devices that are going to be implanted in the body, I could see an exemption there. But if you have to potentially file for an exemption with the FTC or something to have a non-removable battery, I think a lot of devices would stop doing that. Cell phones in particular need to get away from removable batteries. Arguably, that there should be also a ruling law that says all batteries should be designed in such a way that if they start to expand, that they would explode out or eject themselves from their connectors and from the rest of the product. Which that would take some mechanical design, certainly, but if your battery started to short circuit or expand and it just popped off the back of your cell phone, even if that broke the cell phone in the process, that would be an interesting ruling law to have too. Because I imagine if something could eject itself and stop connecting in any way, it would protect more of the electronics and create less e-waste overall. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says February's quote free games from Amazon Prime have been announced. 9 PC titles will be available at no extra charge. Let's see if we've got a list here. Let's see. Currently, you can get The Evil Within 2, Beat Cop, Lawn Mowing Simulator, Chicken Police, Paint It Red, Fairway 2, Jungle Escape, and Breath Edge. Let's see. The new games will be Elder Scrolls 3, Morrowind, Game of the Year, Onsen Master, Aerial Knights Never Yield, Divine Knockout, One Hand Clapping, Bats, Bloodsucker, Anti-Terror Squad, Space Crew Legendary Edition, Chunchi, and Space Warlord Organ Trading Simulator. Some of those games maybe have some relevancy. A lot of those games don't feel very relevant at all. Redfall and the Hogwarts Legacy co-developer Studio Gobo is now working on Sony's Horizon. The UK-based studio teams up with Guerrilla Games to help expand the PlayStation franchise. It definitely feels like they're going to try and milk the Horizon series as much as possible, and honestly, even just releasing a sequel was probably a little too much for a lot of people. Almost certainly Horizon as a series isn't going to be this long-running Assassin's Creed type series that is very successful. It might be a long-running series like Assassin's Creed, but I think it's just going to have diminished returns. That being said, I don't know if PlayStation has much else they can work on until they hire some companies to have some new ideas and greenlight some new ideas, which I'm not sure Sony is willing to allow its first-party businesses that it owns to really do new games. Like, ideally, you would have at least some kind of like game jam type games being made every now and then and released like once a year from PlayStation first party companies, or at least something like that being encouraged and released on the PlayStation. And I'm not sure, I don't think they do anything like that. You don't really see any small experimental games on the PlayStation at all. And that's kind of a mistake. There's another story also that's come out that the developers of Uncharted have come out directly and said they're done with Uncharted. So that's something different. I have no idea why the text ticker is in red at this point. I did change some settings, but I didn't think I'd change that. Just all of a sudden all the text is in red. That's weird. Let's see. Moving on, the Epic Games Store next free titles have been confirmed. Dishonored Death of the Outsider and City of Gangsters will replace Adios and Hell is Others, which Dishonored Death of the Outsider is kind of a big game. City of Gangsters I've never heard of. Video Games Chronicle says here's 5 minutes of the new Wild Hearts gameplay ahead of next month's release. Yeah. I think Wild Hearts definitely is a great example of the right thing to do as far as promoting kind of a new game that's going to be in a new kind of difficult sales pitch compared to Forspoken, which really did a very, very poor job of putting anything out that would catch people's attention. And Forspoken, last I saw, was around 50 to 40% positive ratings. PlayStation boss Jim Ryan reportedly met with the EU antitrust chief this week about the Activision Blizzard deal. It's claimed the EU will warn Microsoft of its concerns about the acquisition this week. Now, warning them seems to still mean nothing. They're just saying, be careful. It doesn't seem like they are actually going to, in any way, block the merger. And I guess if the EU effectively approves the merger, then it really is just the United States that would be the other major entity to stop the merger. I think any other involved countries will either fall in line or won't be a problem either way. Let's see. The GoldenEye re-release studio claims issues are authentic to the Nintendo 64 original. Players have reported graphical issues and frame dips on Xbox, which that is a terrible response, certainly, to say, well, this is as bad as it played originally, but I mean, that is basically what you're getting here. You're not getting GoldenEye remade, which I do think they did make a remake of GoldenEye for like the PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2 a long time ago. You are just getting a emulator effectively playing GoldenEye. And this is inherently what I thought people were going to feel, is that players are going to have nostalgia for GoldenEye 007 and then start playing it and realize that it is just an old game with low frame rates and stuttering bad graphics. There definitely were a lot of glitches that I can even think of off the top of my head, as far as like 3D rendering polygons going in the wrong direction and glitching out. XCOM director says he's not currently working on a new series entry. He did acknowledge that there was a demand for a new XCOM, but says he's busy with Marvel Midnight Suns, which in a lot of ways Marvel Midnight Suns is effectively an XCOM game without the XCOM story. So if you really want to play an XCOM game, probably play Marvel Midnight Suns, but it is also kind of crazy to buy and play a game you don't want to play in the hopes that you're supporting the director, so he will have more work to make a new XCOM in the future. Arguably, there's too many XCOM games already, and they're just not numbered, so it's difficult to know the order and how many of them you really need to play. Far Cry 7 and the standalone Far Cry multiplayer game are reportedly in the works. It's claimed the next mainline series will use the same game engine as The Division. So, Far Cry 6 failed pretty badly. There's not really a lot of reason to get your hopes up for Far Cry 7. It needs a whole new concept, and probably just a reboot of the whole series. When you're getting into the 7th of a series, it's time to just start all over again. A new Far Cry reboot with a main character that is going to follow along a narrative for 2 or 3 sequels has a lot more appeal than just a random person always ending up in a random area, having to run around and like destabilize the area as far as what terrorist or government's in charge. They made such a big deal around these characters in Far Cry 6, and nothing came about it, as far as people didn't care about those characters. HBO and Sky have put The Last of Us Episode 1 on YouTube for free, which, that definitely might be an admittance that they feel like their reach as far as HBO is not as good as they would have liked it, or HBO Plus, that they are having to fall back to YouTube. Of course, this is effectively just an episode long commercial to then get HBO Plus or HBO and Sky TV if you're in the UK. Or Sky TV. But yeah. They noticeably, I don't think, ever put episode 1 of Game of Thrones on YouTube, although in all fairness, episode 1 of Game of Thrones has them pushing a kid out of the window and killing him because he saw a brother and sister committing the act of incest in full nudity. So it would be somewhat hard to have shown episode 1 on YouTube anyways, but you could have blurred it and censored it. I assume there is actually no nudity in The Last of Us Episode 1 too. So this may be the beginning of HBO being less of a Skinamax type channel that was always forcing in nudity. Most noticeably when they forced like nudity into Stargate SG-1 episode 1 for no reason, and then there's never any nudity in any of the other episodes of the hundreds of episodes. Um, but yeah, Game of Thrones probably had a lot of sex and nudity in it, so it kind of made sense there. But in this new whole Me Too movement, Me Too world, I bet HBO is cleaning up its act and stopping being so sleazy around the idea of having nudity in every single one of their shows when it doesn't really require that. I don't think HBO's sales pitch at this point is that it's like cable but more extreme, has nudity, has more violence. I don't think that can be the sales pitch because people have the internet now and can see a lot more nudity and violence for free. HBO needs to sell itself as being the mature, high quality TV channel that you wish all TV channels were, and allow for nudity when it's appropriate, but not force it in. I imagine The Last of Us Episode 1, had it been made by the Sci-Fi Channel, would have been incredibly worse. But had The Last of Us been made by something like even Amazon Prime Video, probably would have been about as good, maybe even better. If Netflix had made The Last of Us, decent chance it would have been as good. And that's where the real competition is now, is that the premium channels like HBO are getting showed up by Amazon and Netflix, and occasionally on the Apple TV originals. I don't think Hulu originals are really happening. Moving on, Battlefield 2042's long-awaited class system update launches next week. Check out that article if you're interested. And then the Forza Motorsport release date may have been delayed, it's been claimed. Which, okay, do we have an actual date? No, because it's just a claim. Could now arrive in Q3 according to this rumor. It's kind of pointless to even report on rumors though, isn't it? Alright, that moves us to the Gematsu articles. Fortress S launches April 27th in Japan. This is, I think, mostly a Worms-like game where you're shooting missiles at each other. Avogado Steam Next Fest demo launches January 26th and has an exclusive trailer. It's a magical RPG meets reverse tower defense. Steam announced its Next Fest. If you happen to follow Steam on YouTube, you'll get very few videos in a year, but this was one of them. The Next Fest are effectively just a collection of demos for games that are coming, but it is frankly probably better than a Microsoft Direct in the sense that you're right there on the page to click on a link to play a free demo, whereas a Microsoft Direct is just showing you trailers. It definitely helps players actually be players and jump into playing a game. This is not the game, but there is a game that looks somewhat similar to this that was just allegedly, and I'll leave it at allegedly, banned and had its Steam page taken down for the good old censorship reason that Steam gives, and that they felt that the robotic character, which honestly looked about like this character, was looked underage, and that there was adult content in it. Inherently, I think we really are still just at a point where if you're going to make an adult game, you have to censor it out, put it on Steam outside of the adult section so people actually see it and buy it, and then you have to just not mention that there is a 18 plus patch on your out there somewhere on the internet for people to download. Uh, and particularly, I think those 18 plus patches have to actually include all the adult content. So they can't just be an empty file that says uncensor.txt or something like that, which a lot of them are just empty files like that. I don't even think Steam wants potentially like encrypted adult content on their servers. But even at that, if you go through all those hoops, there's still a chance your game will get banned. It seems very random, just who looks at the game and what they're feeling at that day. It has been, in all fairness, at least 4 or 5 months since we've had a controversy that has come out as far as a game being disallowed from being listed on Steam. So it does seem like it's somewhat infrequent, but frequent, far too frequent, still in my opinion. Moving on, Gamatsu says Metal Black S Tribute canceled for the PS4 and Switch, priced to match the Arcade Archives release. This is just an old side-scrolling shooter. Otherworldly action-adventure game Strayed Lights has been announced for everything, it seems. Which, yeah, it looks kind of like a otherworldly, maybe Genshin Impact type game. PlayStation is paying Chinese companies to trying to do business with Chinese companies to help promote them making small games. But noticeably, they really aren't doing that with anybody else. They're not promoting small indie games. They're not funding small indie games. And they probably would do better if they had some funding like that always. Of course, Microsoft isn't really doing that either. It's just seems like it's a little easier for small indie games to be listed on Microsoft, and then Nintendo probably isn't paying anybody to list their small indie games on their storefront, but people are definitely listing it there. Minecraft Legends launches April 18th. This is more of a zoomed in appearance of what the game looks like. There are 3 factions, 1 player team, another player team, and then the piglins who would attack both. There are mounts. It, in a lot of ways, does just look a lot like Minecraft, but there are some elements that change things up a little bit and make it a lot more like Fortnite. Forza Motorsports Developer Direct Showcase details the fidelity, immersion, and realism. So check out that video, I guess, if you're interested, or check out these screenshots. It's pretty pictures of a racing game, which, yeah, that's what you expect from racing games. Bethesda Softworks and Tango Gameworks announced rhythm action game High Rush for Xbox Series and PC, now available. Bethesda owns Tango Gameworks, which that doesn't really make a lot of sense now that Microsoft owns ZeniMax and Bethesda. That is definitely a level of where you could eliminate some middle management for sure by having Tango Gameworks and Bethesda both answer directly to Major Nelson, Microsoft Games Division leads, and get rid of ZeniMax completely. Here's a list of the licensed tracks, which, yeah, this almost certainly is going to be very expensive. It does have a streamer mode, so it will turn them off when you're streaming, but 2 9-inch Nails songs, a Black Keys, a Prodigy song, The Joy Formidable, haven't heard of that band. Number Girl, haven't heard of that. That's probably a Japanese band, Wolfgang Gartner, which maybe that's a really old song, and then Zwan. Yeah, I'm always a little concerned when you see them spending a lot of money licensing music, but whatever. It's probably not a very long game, if I would guess anything. You can play it on Steam, Epic Game Store, and Microsoft Store. Let's see what they have to say on Steam right now. It's overwhelmingly positive. So, even though I have no rhythm, I'll put this on the wish list. Of course, unless I had just downloaded this game the second it was available and missed it and purchased it, there's no way I would have gotten a video out in time to get any views around that, which I don't have time to do any of that at the moment. Let's see, the Elder Scrolls Online Necrom expansion launches January 5th for PC, and then June 5th for PC, and then June 20th for the consoles that it is on. I guess people are still playing Elder Scrolls Online. In a lot of ways, just looking at like this trailer, this probably shows how much progress has been made since Skyrim as far as just visuals, although this really is just a trailer anyways. But it does certainly imply that there probably should be cutscenes in the next Elder Scrolls game, and that there should be more characters, more interesting characters in the next Elder Scrolls game. But there is definitely a possibility that the actual gameplay content here is still very much looking like Skyrim, and even Skyrim Remastered, still kind of an old game. In a lot of ways, there needs to be major improvements on the gameplay mechanics of the next Elder Scrolls game too. I would like to see a point where swinging your sword is not just mashing a button and doing one single animation of swinging the sword, that you could either decide to swing your sword in different directions, or at least have animations that swing the sword into different directions. This is definitely just far too much of a trailer. I'd like to compare that to what actual gameplay looks like, but whatever, I don't have time for that. Redfall launches May 2nd. I will leave it at that for Gamatsu. Xbox Game Pass adding High Rush, GoldenEye 007, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and All-Star Battle R. More coming in late January to early February. A game called Fuga Melodies of Steel 2 launches on May 11th for looks like everything. Anthropomorphic creatures, cat creatures, fox creatures. I'd say fox if I was to guess. Is this the one where you're controlling the tanks, and then the tanks are like powered by the souls of your characters? It may very well be, because that was a weird game when it came out, the first one around this series. Yep. There is a question, certainly in my mind, as to whether you would call this a furry game or not. Like, at a certain level, I don't inherently want to call it a furry game, because there has been just this history in the past of, like, Mickey Mouse certainly establishing the idea of an anthropomorphic mouse. I don't think you would call Mickey Mouse a furry icon, uh, or a furry cartoon. It just doesn't quite feel like that would be the case. I wouldn't call My Little Pony a furry cartoon either. If I was going to call something furry, it basically would have to be either around humans dressing up as furries, which I definitely call that a furry game at that point, or it has to be particularly sexual focused, or advertise itself specifically as furry. But I would definitely lean on not calling something like this a furry game, just because it's anthropomorphic animals. Because then you get into the weirdness of, is that game Moss, where you play as an actual mouse? Is that a furry game? I doubt it. There was a game called Redwall that, I don't know if Redwall ever came out. It was based on, I think, a book series called Redwall. That was a mouse that was a kind of human in its actions, but definitely mouse-like. Moving on, Mercenaries Lament Requiem of the Silver Wolf has a debut trailer. This, to me, looks just like a RPG. It says it's a turn-based RPG. Not particularly interesting. The Switch version is due out February 9th in January. PS4 version, I guess, later date. A game called Madorica Real Estate 2. The Mystery of the New Property is coming to PC. It's currently available for Switch. Seems to me like it's probably a puzzle game of some sort. Yeah. Seems like you have to go through different rooms. It might be an interesting game, but it could also be basically nothing. The thing I would want to see, though, is, can you get the first game? Yeah. You walk around in 3D environments, and then there's a whole map. Let's look at what the first game looks like. Not particularly relevant here, with only 43 reviews, but very positive at 93%. And yep, it's a collection of escape room games. At some point I put this on the fall list. I'm sure I did, and then I removed it from the fall list. I guess at this point I'm going to reverse that decision and put it on the wish list now for the first game. And then I would think about this game when it actually releases. And this might be a great example of yet another game that will magically just not show up on my list and never actually be put on the fall list, because there does just seem to be a percentage of games where that happens. Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak free title update for digital event set for February 1st. If you're interested or playing that game, check out that article from Gamatsu. Terminal Velocity Boosted Edition has been announced for consoles and PC. This is a first-person shooter. Looks like an old Super NES type game. Perhaps just a re-release / low-effort remaster by Ziggurat, which I think Ziggurat does that a lot. Kenny Omega and Raul Coley. Yeah. This character, Raul Coley, I have no idea who he would have even played in Midnight Mass. He could have been any of the characters. Midnight Mass, I really wouldn't be able to tell you. I guess he was the sheriff. Come to think of it, yeah. The Muslim sheriff in Midnight Mass with his son, and they were, and everybody else on the island was Catholic, and so there was some conflict there, certainly, in that he was being pushed to assimilate and go to the Catholic Church, or his son was being pushed more than even he was to go to the Catholic Church. Moving on, Shinobi Non Grata adds a PS4 and Switch versions. Okay. It's not a game I recognize. It's releasing pretty quickly, it seems. Does it have an actual release date? Pre-orders are the 29th. Nope, it doesn't have a release date. It just says Q1 of 2023, which that's a pretty wide window. A sequel or a prequel to Road 96 Mile Zero has been announced for everything. Road 96 being a game that I guess came out, and I saw trailers for it, certainly, and then didn't really see any reception or reviews for it. Since I've stopped listening to Giant Bomb, I've been listening to instead Kind of Funny Games. I think there's also problems and controversies around Kind of Funny Games, but I don't even remember what the controversies were, other than I think there was one guy who quit the show because he was outed as being right-leaning and didn't want to deal with the controversy around that. But yeah, one of the problems about Kind of Funny Games podcasts that I've heard so far is they kind of aren't really talking about games or reviewing games, which creates the same problem that was with Giant Bomb, really, in its later days and later years, in that Giant Bomb really stopped talking about games and mostly only was talking about news or giving just general conversation or general impressions. Whereas I would like somebody to have a podcast where they actually talk about the whole experience of the game and just not try to always hide it in a review on some website. Because yeah, if you are more of a audio listener, you're not going to want to go and read some website review. And most people don't read reviews. Even if you are on the website, they just look for the score. Famitsu sales have been updated here on Gamatsu. I think we'll try and go through these sales numbers as quickly as possible going forward. Fire Emblem Engage taking the #1 spot away from Pokemon. I think Pokemon was in the #1 spot. And then, well, it's PlayStation 5 taking away the #1 spot in sales from the Switch OLED model. But interestingly, even though the PlayStation 5 is selling hardware, you just have One Piece Gran Turismo in the top 30 as far as sales of software. So it's like people are buying PlayStation 5s to either buy things digitally, which maybe aren't being counted, or just to play Blu-rays. Which, yeah, I might make an argument around buying a PlayStation 5 just to be a Blu-ray player. Although that is something that I've been thinking about, as I would like to get a new Blu-ray player at some point. Is it better nowadays to get a Sony PlayStation for a Blu-ray player, or is a Microsoft Series X just as good, if not better, as a Blu-ray player? I mean, they probably both do everything fairly well, but one might do it slightly better as far as just sound quality, video quality, or features, or compatibility. I definitely would have to do more research. Like, I would definitely lean towards more getting an Xbox Series X as a Blu-ray player. Anyways, but I could be tempted to go the other way, particularly if either one of them were cheap or used. Wild Hearts Golden Tempest trailer is available if you want to check that out. A game called Redemption Reapers launches February 22nd. Let's see. Looks like it is a maybe turn-based action RPG, or well, either it's an action RPG or a turn-based RPG. One or the other, can't really be both. Although I guess you could make a game that worked both ways. Let's see. Turn-based RPG. Yeah, my stomach's starting to upset me, so probably need to hurry even more. Yep, it's a positional placement strategy RPG game, which is never my style. I kind of like the art style here, but it'd probably get somewhat dull. There is definitely an argument towards having a brightly colored palette that's more anime-esque when you're going to do a lot of grinding and gameplay, which arguably I don't know if I want any game to be particularly grindy these days. The game The Pathless for Xbox Series, Xbox One, and Switch launches February 2nd, which I would have sworn this game had already come out, but I guess there's probably a different game that looks very similar to this. I remember seeing trailers for this. A game called Cook Serve Forever launches in early access on April, and yeah, it is one of those Cook Serve Delicious games, but perhaps with a slightly different art style. Really nice looking hot dog animation here, and then very weird looking person here. A game called Loretta for PC launches February 6th. Console versions due out at a later day. This is not connected to the cat lady, I guess. Because I don't think this isn't the right publisher or company for the cat lady. But there was a character named Loretta in the cat lady. Or maybe I'm confusing it with Lorelei. And visually, yeah, it definitely looks very similar as far as its gameplay style. This is one of those times where somebody potentially just ripping off the cat lady is exactly what I would want to see and what I like. When you have these small niche, easy to make type games, relatively easy to make type games, where you just have to be good at the horror elements and the storytelling elements to really just a small level, there really is no reason to not have somebody else copy you and create more competition and then raise the bar for everybody to see a whole collection of these types of games. It's establishing perhaps a point and click adventure that maybe is really not even that much of a point and click, instead being just a nice middle ground between a visual novel and having some gameplay mechanics. So yeah, this looks interesting to me. Of course, if you don't like horror games, you won't like it. If you don't like adventure games, you won't like it. If you want way more action, you probably won't like it. A Vanillaware fantasy game teased in 2019 is at the end of development, says George Kamitani, one of Vanillaware's biggest production. It's been a long time since I've even heard of Vanillaware. I would have thought that a company had gone out of business, or possibly Vanillaware never really existed and it was just a description of a style of game. Atlas is going to be the publisher. Let's see. Vanillaware last release, I guess, 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim prologue. Yeah, that is kind of a long time, kind of a long wait. And the visuals here very soft watercolory. Featurism Final Bar Line details its Season Pass 1 DLC. We're getting dangerously close to a saturation point as far as rhythm games. In this case, the rhythm games are kind of varied and I guess have some Final Fantasy characters showing up in them also. As like, I guess, a crossover element. Yeah. Okay, I guess I'll leave it at that. A game called Grim Guardians Demon Purge has an opening movie, which I'd assume that this is some kind of anime style game. It says side-scrolling action platformer. So let's jump around. Seems to be kind of silly comic booky. These two characters show up. I believe these characters are from a different game series. Like the Galgun Pixie series or the Galgun series in general. And then they're weirdly being put into a kind of Castlevania type experience. Doing something very different. Which, fine, I guess if you like your characters, bring them into a totally different type of game if you want to make a different type of gameplay style. You can see very little is being shown as far as actual gameplay, though, just barely a few frames here. It definitely feels like it is just a old school Castlevania game. I wouldn't be 100% surprised if it actually is set in the exact castle from a previous Castlevania game, and it's just the new characters with new abilities or new skins of the new characters with the same old abilities. Moving on, the Crimson Flower That Divides Lunar Coupling demo is now available for a Switch. This looks like a visual novel, otome visual novel. Young maiden visual novel. And then R-Type Final 3 Evolved has a debut trailer if you want to check that out. Alright. And so, with that, I will now hit the shortcut key, come over here, and we'll see if that blur is good enough. I tried to do about 1.5 the resolution that I was doing before, so that seems like that is probably the right amount of blur, where you can still kind of recognize things, but you aren't able to, say, make out that there's a guy here in any real detail, or you can just kind of generally get the idea that there's a guy here. Of course, it won't really be until we get to the adult content. The irony here is also that last stream, the stream crashed, my computer reboot, and it just takes so long to reboot that it ends the stream. YouTube does. You would have had to just click the button to start a new stream, and I should have done that. There's something to this that seems like it might be a little interesting. After the reboot, I was talking about and showing off the censorship, and it really wasn't doing quite good enough of a job censoring and doing the mosaic, so I guess in a funny way I kind of protected myself. Now if I start doing the blur and it crashes or reboots my computer again, then obviously there's something about the blur filters that I'm doing that are the problem. But I'm not going to worry about that. Would I want to put a follow on this game? I don't think so. Today is Friday, so there really is no reason that we wouldn't have seen at least one adult game. This feels like an adult game. Mild sexuality and strong language. That's all it says. Looks like it is an Asian visual novel with anime girls, nurses. And see, this is a funny thing, is because you could probably draw these characters to be a lot more moe and like younger looking, and put them in a nursing outfit, and then Valve would probably say, okay, we'll allow this game because obviously they're not in school, therefore they're adults. Redshifts is on the chat asking if he can try out this new deck with me. Sorry, no. I don't have time for it today. I'd assume that this is a Japanese game, but it is weird that there is no Japanese listing until you get way below the fold. But it does have Japanese full audio and subtitles, so obviously it is a Japanese game. Do I need to put this on the follow list or make a YouTube short around it? No, I don't think I will, for either reasons. It's too dangerous to make YouTube shorts around adult games anyways. Even some of the big adult games are not getting YouTube shorts because they have an age verification gate in front of them. Particularly if they're sold by the ESRB, they have this. The ESRB seems to require an age gate on mature rated games, whereas if it's just released on Steam and nothing else, they don't have to do that. Alright, this next game, Touch and Hypnosis Kunoichi Ninja Kunai, is an adult game for $13.99. Japanese full audio support. And let's see. You know what this is this is a Law Blue Girl parody. It's definitely not the visual animations from Law Blue Girl, but somewhat similar to it. That being said, I don't know how many people remember Law Blue Girl. Yep. And you certainly, I guess, in this blurring, that blurring's still probably not good enough. I don't think that's quite good enough as far as blurring, so I'm gonna have to blur it out more. Like, there's probably something else I need to do instead of just pixeling it, but yeah. I doubt very many people remember Law Blue Girl as far as one of the first sold in the West DVDs or VHSs. Originally, it was definitely VHS of porn animes many decades ago. At least a couple decades ago. So I imagine there's not a lot of interest there. As far as what the actual game is, it seems like it is just mostly a sex simulator with no other gameplay mechanic. Do I want to do anything with Downfallen? No, I don't think it's quite good enough as a game. Cube Matrix. Burning through every single game that came out on Steam just to see which ones deserve YouTube shorts. Is this another adult game? I don't think so. It contains a bathing scene. Japanese full audio. What's funny is we haven't seen a lot of announcements for well, they definitely made sure to put the bathing scene in the screenshots. Um, we haven't seen a lot of announcements for new Japanese visual novels. Guess I'll give this a follow, but I won't make a YouTube short around it just to see if it might turn out to be good. Notice they're selling this now with Steam Deck support, and that will be the way visual novels go these days, is it is just going to be Steam Deck support for simplistic visual novel games in particular by default and as a selling point. And in a lot of ways, we will see a lot of games selling themselves as having Steam Deck support. Here's a great example of a game that potentially could get a few more people's attention if it says or claims to support Steam Deck, and very quickly we'll have people lying about whether they've even tested it on the Steam Deck or not. Equal People here is just an asset flip garbage game as far as I can tell. Here we have a Halloween-like slide puzzle, out of season. Alien Battlefield, looks like nothing. And then Hentai 15 Puzzle to 02 is obviously a slide puzzle for $2.99, English only. And again, Blur, not particularly good. This is interesting because they have actually bothered to censor it this time with just a white bars, and arguably that should be the way you sell any adult game, just because you want to actually tempt people into buying your product. Next we have another adult game, Sex Adventures The Job Promotion, which this is a 3D CGI adult visual novel with 3D realistic models, realistic color palette, selling for $2.09, English only. We get about 1 to 3 of these each week. Maybe even as many as 9 each week, come to think of it. But that is pretty much the only thing that falls under the category as more of a Western adult game, is it is always 3D CGI asset flips of the exact same characters. Here we have something different. I'm actually a little surprised we don't have more of these types of games. Not Safe for Work, Solitaire, which is Free Cell, Klondike. No, it's probably Klondike Solitaire. And then a collection of porn images on each card. And these porn images are somewhat consistent, but not consistent enough to make me assume that they'd all been custom made. They very well have been licensed or stolen. Seems like there is actually a decent type of card games in it. It's just like every kind of solitaire game you would think of, and not just Klondike, but also Free Cell, Pyramids, some of the more extreme ones. The thing about this in particular, it's free, so it's kind of like the best option possibly, and it's got 70 plus solitaire variants. It's English only, and then it has seems to be 5 different card decks. And the one thing I would really want to see more than that is something that would let you put in your own card decks or have free DLC or workshop support for your own card decks. Because inherently, there really is no reason why this interface wouldn't be a little bit better looking and you wouldn't be able to just upload or add your own images. But interestingly, I have not seen any competition for this game. You would have thought that in the years that I've been looking at games on Steam, you would see more games like this come out. and it just doesn't happen. You see occasionally a solitaire game that has like one deck at most, and that's it. Next we have Femdom wife game Zoe, which slightly different 3D models, still kind of in a realistic color pattern, and it seems like there might even be a more of a gameplay element to it. Seems like there's some mini games like cooking, or that get you some kind of money, that get you more clothing. So there's kind of like a gotcha dress up item to it. Interesting. It's, at least it feels like a game. But then it oddly is in early access. They want $17.99. Says it has full English, full audio support, which I question heavily. Let's see. Gunwatch Conflict Survival. It has a chance of being good, so I'll make a YouTube short around that. Frontier Grunt. Probably nothing here, so I'm gonna say no. Still, the vast majority of games that come out on Steam are not worth anything. Break Everything Park. Sounds like an interesting idea, but you would want more of an interesting environment if that was the way it was going to play down. If this is a game where you have like a tennis ball launcher and everything you shoot breaks, the things you could shoot aren't that interesting. You need to use the toy rifle to shoot balls to destroy objects, as the description here, which that is too little of a description also. Really want to hurry up here. Man, my chair is just going flat. I got a new pillow, and one of the things about the pillow is that it has foam cubes in it, so I can just remove some foam to make it less fluffy, and I'm gonna have to do that. It also has like a bamboo side and a cooling side, and it was actually a 2-pack, so I have this extra pillow that maybe I'll just sit on. But what was really surprising is that it was vacuum sealed small, which is not super surprising as far as foam pillows, foam mattresses. So it was in a very small box. Then said put it in the microwave, put it in the dryer for 15 minutes on low, and I did that, and then it came out incredibly huge and just way overfluffed, way more overfluffed than I thought it would be. It had already expanded to what I thought the size was going to be when I got it out of the plastic bag, but I thought maybe it would get twice as fluffy, but no, it is just hugely overfluffed. But because it's foam cubes instead of a solid foam piece, which arguably I think I would prefer a solid foam piece, multiple layers perhaps, with gel infusion, it has that too, for more cooling. But yeah, it is a little weird to be sleeping on what are effectively soft rocks. Do I want to do the Dudic Master? Make a short around this. No, this still looks just a little too generic as a platformer. Hike Trip, I thought we had already seen Hike Trip. Seems like it got relisted once again. I still don't think I'd say yes to it though. Grappling Dash. Tedrum. Hope. Negative Atmosphere Emergency Room. Well, that looks interesting. So I'll put that on the follow list. Hmm. I would like a game where you actually do the procedure of being a surgeon or a mortician, um, even if you are going to add some silliness or magic to it, like Trauma Surgeon. What was that game? It was called Trauma something. I think in the gym is some weird asset flip joke game. Hmm. Yeah, it's a troll game. Dead Space. See, this is funny because you're gonna inherently you're going to inherently have Dead Space versus Dead Space, the original Dead Space, which maybe that has been removed. It's interesting, there is no user reviews yet. And then I reloaded, and then it's very positive. So I'll put this on the wish list. I own Dead Space 1. We are at the point of $70 games. And Dead Space, the original Dead Space here, is labeled now as Dead Space 2008. If you wanted to purchase it, you can purchase it. Still, and Dead Space 3 Awakened is DLC. Yeah. So they did the right thing here. They didn't eliminate Dead Space 2008. But actually, let's see if we can point out just the visuals of Dead Space 2008. It's probably the exact same trailer that we're going to start with. You're going to see the girlfriend and maybe see a picture of Isaac. I'd say the way Isaac looks now is younger in the Dead Space remake, and I don't know if I particularly like it as much. But yeah, you can definitely see there's kind of a low resolution pixeliness to it. They really aren't hiding the surprise of the monsters either. See. Maybe there's a screenshot here that would show the girlfriend. Here you can see some fairly rough face of that character. Isaac just has his helmet on the whole time. I remember people singing the praises of the original Dead Space because he was keeping his helmet on the whole time. And they've kind of gone back from that now. But yeah, you've got more visuals, better visuals. A lot of it looks very similar though. That they aren't trying to change too much. Like the face here looks very much better. Next generation. Going from 2008 to 2023 arguably is a little bit much. But yeah, if anything, I've talked too much about complaining about the girlfriend's face completely changing and not talked enough about how Isaac's face has changed because I kind of don't like the way Isaac's face looks. Most of these characters, doesn't matter what they look like, they get killed at the beginning of the game anyways. There definitely are some iconic scenes being shown here, and there's more visual fidelity and focus on it. Yeah, inherently, I guess it doesn't really matter too much what Isaac looks like. You're not going to see him that often. It would be interesting if it turned out that both the Dead Space 2008 and this Dead Space both happened in the mind of the same Isaac, and one was like a hallucination or a dream, or this parallel universe, or one Isaac is a clone of the other Isaac. Any of those could be an interesting twist, certainly. Right, we're almost done looking at all the games, so I'll make a YouTube short around hidden object games because why not? I do think there is a fandom there. The Soul's Choice doesn't look good enough. Chimera Blinding Loves Collector's Edition. As far as hidden object games, I guess we'll do that too. It has been a couple weeks since we've seen a hidden object game that I recall. Bloody hell. I'll give that a chance too and make a YouTube short around it. Mount Farewell. At a certain level, if I actively picked out garbage games or that looked bad, I would get more people commenting on my YouTube shorts. I guess the question really is just how much do I want to try and bait people into commenting versus curating something that's actually good. And I think in general, well, there might even be a game here. The visuals are just a little too rough. And I do want to sell myself on these YouTube shorts as actually being a decent curator of games. So putting out garbage, I think, is going to be a no-go. Friendly Facade. Unless it just looks weird. Like somebody might be interested in it. Which is why I might say yes to this visual novel. But it is also an early access visual novel in English. So I think that's still going to be a no. And then Ashes of War. Visual novel. Adult only visual novel. English only, $9.99. This is interesting because you almost never get this where something is in the adult section and then every single screenshot actually seems to be showing the actual game parts and not really focusing in on the adult parts. Sure, in all fairness, you have somebody in a tank top with some large breasts and you're seeing some belly here, but that's fairly normal and natural. And then same thing, cleavage here, skin tight suit here, accentuating the female form. Seems to be all females in this game, but that's not really that extreme at all. That's pretty average, and so much so that you get into the problem of this being a visual novel that may not really have enough adult content in it to need to be in the adult section in the first place, and won't sell as well because it is hidden in the adult section. Alright, so we're at the GameDevelopers.com news articles now. We had already talked about this. The vast majority of game developers are worried about targeted harassment. Devs weigh in on the uptick in harassment aimed at creators. Of course, the problem with this survey was only 42% of those surveyed said it was a very serious issue, while 38% only opted as a serious issue. And then the other part of the survey is only 40% of the representatives have said they have experienced harassment from the player community during their time on a project. So it really can't be that big of an issue, whether for them to think it's a big issue or not. I guess it is really just a matter of phrasing there, certainly, but yeah, bullying or targeted harassment in other fields would definitely not be considered a major issue amongst all the other issues. Uh, I could probably run a survey if I was a survey person, asking gamers about uh, asking people who play games whether they feel like game companies are obsessed about harassment towards them, or that or or that they're just a bunch of snowflakes, for lack of a better term. And I bet you would get much higher than 40% responses there. Inherently, that's another thing, is that you see a lot of these IT people getting laid off recently, and it's sad that people lose their jobs and all, but it's really hard to shed a tear when a lot of them probably didn't deserve the jobs in the first place, weren't doing much work in the jobs anyways, weren't doing anything anybody liked in a lot of those jobs, and the vast majority of people are working at least one job full time, if not 2 or 3 jobs, to just struggle to make ends meet. So, and that never really gets any press coverage from the other direction. Let's see. Moving on, Elden Ring and Stray lead the GDCA 2023 nominations. Game Developer Conference Awards, I guess is maybe what that stands for. Game Developers Choice Awards. Yeah, and these are going to be awards for just games that came out in 2022, which arguably giving out awards after the end of the year is logical from a practical stance, but probably not that effective as far as keeping people's attention, because nobody's really going to be thinking about these games now. Other games are coming out. Guerrilla enlists Studio Gobo to help with co-develop the Horizon franchise. We already talked about that. Proletariat, the company, claims that the Communication Workers of America union's adversarial quote-unquote tactics led to the union withdrawal. Employees at Proletariat argue the situation with its halted union efforts aren't as black and white as the studio's logo. So yeah, the CWA said in a previous article that it was the Proletariat's CEO in particular's fault that he put out a bunch of propaganda and did some union busting type actions, and that's why they had to withdraw the vote to unionize. Now, Proletariat slash the CEO is saying it's because the CWA had adversarial tactics, which a union is inherently always going to be adversarial, so it is a stupid, dumb complaint. It is definitely Proletariat and the CEO trying to pretend like they were for the idea of unionization when they absolutely were not. But this is, interestingly, the real ugliness that happens when you try to unionize, and the kind of ugliness that happens even after you've unionized. And that's why, in a lot of ways, if you're working in a job that has a union, it's going to be a tough place to work, and you're going to have to really fight for your rights quite a bit, because there is going to be this adversarial nature that has to be established by unionizing, because the management was treating the employees so badly before the fact that they needed to unionize in the first place. Nobody's going to listen to CWA if they show up at a company and say, hey, why don't you guys unionize, if the CEO of your company is doing a good job and treating everybody well. But yeah, it's probably good that some of this ugliness is just put out and fought out in public, so people really know the kinds of ridiculous tactics that happen. And 10 years ago, a lot of news reporters would not fairly report on unionization efforts or report on unionization efforts at all. So it was all very well hidden, and people couldn't even get the word out that they were fighting or struggling to unionize. So at least now it's getting somewhat reported. Although arguably there's a lot of industries that should unionize before video game development has. There was this controversy, which I don't want to go into great details. The game the day before has been voluntarily delisted by the publishers, or the developers, I think. Not the publishers, I think it's both, actually, in this case. Due to a trademark claim. Inherently, they announced the game as a Kickstarter by the name the day before. Seems like somebody who's kind of a patent troll filed for a trademark by that name, but his filing would have been after the point that the game was announced anyways, so there's already prior art that would have totally invalidated a trademark, and so there really isn't a reason why they couldn't have just released the game. And there's already been I think one delay, and this is really just another delay, and it seems like they are using this as an excuse. You could go tinfoil hat and say that the developers of the day before are intentionally they hired that other patent troll to file the trademark so that they could use that as an excuse. That is definitely a tinfoil hat conspiracy thought, but it's possible. But yeah, they're just using it as an excuse. Like, trademarks, if they've already been used and announced, don't have any they don't have any real value, and they certainly could have just released the game under a different name. The day before arguably shouldn't even be trademarkable anyways as a phrase, so yeah. It definitely just comes off to me as a total excuse. They may have to fight it in court, but whatever. They should just release their game if they've got a game to release, and I just don't think they do. There is obviously a lot of interest around this game, though, and that's why people are talking about it. Here's that story. Naughty Dog says it's finished with the Uncharted franchise. The series is as retired as Nathan Drake. So, yeah, Neil Druckmann, he isn't looking to revisit the action-adventure franchise anytime soon. Okay, well, that kind of kills Uncharted unless Sony hands Uncharted to somebody else, which is possible, but I don't think Sony really would do that. I think they're just not that ambitious, which is part of the problem. Sony really should have handed Nathan Drake over to a new company, and then you should have had every year, if not a Horizon and an Uncharted game released each year, a 1 year Uncharted, 1 year Horizon schedule would have made a lot of sense. A company called Metacore has bought a game called Everdale that was a mobile city builder scrapped by Supercell, which I guess they're going to try and finish it and sell it. And then Mega Cat Studios nets a substantial investment from Skybound. Skybound is working with Mega Cat to publish RPG adventure game WrestleQuest. Skybound, I think, is probably better known as a comic book publisher than a video game company, but I guess maybe they're a little bit of both. This might be the Walking Dead company. Yeah, I think it is. As you see, there's Invincible, and then Walking Dead, and then several other things that, oddly, the Callisto Protocol. Yep. Alright, and then we've got some follow list stuff here. This chemistry game looks excuse me, sorry, I'm wearing out my voice. I don't even know how I'm doing that. This chemistry game looks like an interesting little puzzle game. But obviously I'm going to have to make a special exception to put it on the wish list because it's not relevant. So we'll do that. Bug Dungeon needs more time. Buddy and Lucky Solitaire. Here you have a non-adult solitaire game of some thought. I already have an own tabletop simulator, so arguably maybe it's not worth this. What's interesting is this is labeled as a hidden object game, but I don't think that's really what it is. It would be interesting if you had to find the cards in a hidden object puzzle before you could play them. But I don't think that's really what this is. Somebody's probably just using the wrong tags. Buckle Up and Drive is rated very positively, so we'll put that on the wish list. I need to make sure they're not early access games. Buccaneers, A New Age of Piracy. Do I want a low polygon piracy game? I think I'm gonna say no in this case. I'm not that big of a pirate game fan. And there's already a couple big pirate games out there to think about. Bubble Shooter FX is too much of a Bubble Bobble clone for its own good, so I'm gonna say no to that. Brutal Orchestra. It's an RPG game. I'm gonna say yes to putting this on the wish list, but in particular these turn-based type games generally get too grindy for my own taste. Book versus the World of Doom. I think I have to say no to this because it's just not relevant and it's still in early access. Broken Universe Tower Defense. Do I want a tower defense game with weird animations? You know what? I'll think about that next time I look at it. And we have a game called Broken. Looks like a walking simulator. No, not enough reviews. And then Brock the Investigator can go on the wish list. Now, arguably, I'm getting a lot of things on the wish list these days. So, did we look at all of these? I think we did. Right. I put my controller down, which once again has it leaning on something. Yeah, ever since I moved my table, I don't have a table anymore to put my controller on it, so I'm just trying to stick it in the floor, and that's not working. I start to spectate, and then that'll be it for this stream. Let's see. Which, I guess if I'm going to start to spectate, I have to actually hit the shortcut. I'm going to make that mistake a lot, where I go to just a blurred video and assume the spectate is playing. And I'm going to scroll down my Twitter feed. It does feel like there was a decent amount of tweets today, but a lot of them are from the exact same thing. Dragon Quest mobile game will shut down in April. 2K is tweeting a bunch of stuff about its company. Apparently it's an anniversary or something for 2K. And that's probably why there are a decent amount of tweets. And they're tweeting about a lot of old games that they made many years ago. Very different 2K from what exists now. And I think I've already... Yeah. I think I've already seen everything. Here's an interesting point out. It's just like still the kind of ridiculous bundling for collector's editions of the Dead Space remake with a helmet, and I assume this is an audio CD and a little figurine and posters and pencil boards and things like that. So there is still a lot of that happening. Right. Retweets to chance to win the 2K Ultimate Steam code. Rules 2K. I may retweet that. I'm sure there's some 2K games I don't own. And if they could give me a Steam code that would get them all, although at a certain point. Nope. Seems like the winners have already been chosen. Anyways, I would like to see what the rules were and what that actually was. So I'll look at that off screen, off the stream. Let's see. Yeah, I don't think there's anything more to talk about. It's just consistently going to be the case. And then, yeah, I definitely need to play more if I have time. Already up to level 9 in the of 100 levels. So very quickly we will get to level 100 and then spend 2 months with not seeing the dual pass, which is fine. If anything, I guess the dual pass shows that the amount they would like you to play versus the amount they actually expect you to play is fairly different. Anyways, that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend to follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.